Good evening, everybody. My name is Major General Retired. That's the big word, retired. Brian Watson. I'm the president of Army Engineer Association. Welcome to Engineer Rally Point. Just a couple things before I turn it over to Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Peavy and walk us through this. A couple things from an AEA standpoint I just think are worth mentioning. First of all, Engineer Rally Point. This is about topics that the Commandant and many of you all out in the field want to talk about. It is a professional development forum, very informal, done in the evening so that you can visit while you're at home, not impinge on the duty day. We do hang it, so the reason it's being recorded is we will put it on the Army Engineer Association website, and a lot of people download them afterwards. But the idea is to really hit at the mid-career. What is on mid-careerist minds, both officers, non-commissioned officers, warrant officers, topics that will help you broaden your perspective, topics that will help you through the next deployment, some sharing of your personal techniques. And we all know that the Army is right now pivoting, continuing to pivot. And so I think the more that we can get this professional dialogue going within our regiment, the better we are. So tonight's topic is one that is, I think, extraordinarily interesting. Don't think of this as a USACE, United States Army Corps of Engineers thing. They're going to lead. But here's the deal. The topic we're going to talk about, which is, how do we support as a regiment, largely through the Corps of Engineers, but how do we respond to major crises that are civilian in nature? And what are the capabilities and how do we leverage it? And then the main topic tonight is what are we doing for the fires, aftermath of the fires, wildfires in Hawaii. But I want you to keep in mind that all of these things, the leveraging of these skills, the ability to work with our civilian partners, the framework that's used, all of that, I guarantee you, whether we're in a LISCO environment or back in a COIN environment, it doesn't matter. We're going to have to leverage these same capabilities within our regiment. And so it's worth studying this response because I think we will have to do this in the future, and it won't be necessarily in a peacetime operation. Last, I want you to just a quick plug. One of the things that AEA has been thinking about, you asked for it, is how we can help with post military service careers. And so we've got some pretty exciting announcements. We're going to roll this out. I just asked you, we're still nailing down the details, but we're going to make a huge announcement, make a huge effort. We'll announce it on Veterans Day in honor of veterans in this regiment. And so just a point, I don't want to get too far ahead of the board of directors and my executive director, but this is going to be huge. It's going to bring a huge capability to AEA, and I'm very excited about it. So stay posted on Facebook and other social media. Go up on our webpage because you're not going to want to miss this. So without any further delay, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Peavy is going to kind of start us off, come to us from District Command. And Ryan, we're thanks for doing this. Thanks for stepping into the breach, my friend, and kind of laying this out for us so we all can better understand not only the capabilities that you've leveraged for the people in Hawaii, but also how do we do this when we get called upon to do it again. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Waiting for my audio to catch up here. Thank you, sir. Waiting for my audio to unmute. Sir, thanks for the opportunity to comment on. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. As General Watson stated, I'm Ryan Peavy. I am the commander for the Honolulu District, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And before here, I was the 25th ID to Venge. Happy to talk with anyone online about that experience as well. For the agenda, we're going to talk about our support to DSCA and what we're doing currently, as General Watson stated. And sir, you're spot on there. for me, this is about stewarding the profession and providing those lessons learned for our officer corps as because you could see yourself in this position. You could see yourself in the position that Chief Simon is in. You see him online, or maybe the deputy commander or project engineer, and I can go through that as well. So who I have online, you don't see is my deputy, Major Joe Kendall, promotable. We're going to promote him next Friday. He's been delaying it because of the Maui fires. For Chief Simon, who is part of the power team, he'll brief today. He's also part of the beta test within the regiment to get Chief Warrant officers into USACE, and it has paid absolute dividends. He was with me in Guam during the response with FEMA with the Stafford Act for DSCA, and then here. And currently I'm in Oahu. I'm actually going to fly out, sir, after this, but go back to Maui. I have to meet some elders this evening and tomorrow to start doing shaping operations for debris removal. Sir, for the agenda, you see there introductions that we're going through now. I'm going to go over Stafford Act and what that means to us as USACE. What is this thing of USACE? How is it applied to DSCA? The National Support Framework and how we link in, because probably a lot of your experiences so far are military-centric. This is a military operation, don't get me wrong, but it's broader in the concept of federal agencies to include state elected officials and federal officials as well. Our ESF3 mission, specifically what we're doing, like what mission we're given. Our response teams, temporary power, I'll go over to Max for that. I'll talk specifically about the debris mission, which we had in both in Guam here in Hawaii. And then critical public facilities, which is one of the missions, then questions at the end. If any questions from you, sir, the comment out, I'll go to the next slide. All right, Joe, let's go next. So what is this thing we call USACE that supports the DSCA? This is a place map that kind of shows you our preparedness cycle of everything we do. So we do two things. With the Stafford Act, we do DSCA, and that is support to the civil authorities. As the Title 10, that mission is given the DOD, and it's given down to us. There's another one I'll briefly talk about, Auspilian 499, which is a little bit separate than DSCA, and it's very rare because it's coastal and riverine flooding. But as essentially as something happens, as a natural disaster happens, we use that Stafford Act and we plug into FEMA in support as part of Title 10 through whether we're doing debris removal in a typhoon or what we're doing currently within fire debris. I'm not going to go through every single one, but it kind of shows you life cycle of where an emergency may occur and the different authorities that go with that. Let's go to the next slide. So Stafford Act, that gives us our authority for DSCA. There's two things. I mentioned public law 8499 and Stafford, and we'll focus on Stafford Act. Once something happens, it's interesting because we're part of the Department of Defense, but in the Stafford Act, once the president declares a declaration, that allows FEMA to start moving. Essentially, they have a slush fund that moves before the declaration, but the declaration allows for the full weight of the federal government to help a state or a territory. Under the Stafford Act, we are directly tasked by FEMA under what's called a mission assignment. As you see those sections there that help describe that, and that's our relationship. So here in Hawaii, we have a Title 10 relationship where we're reporting to our FORSCOM unit, our direct reporting it with USACE, but also we're supporting USAPAC, the 25th ID as a senior commander, and any of those Title 10 or DoD elements that are on the ground. But because FEMA controls the money, what they're doing is they're mission assignments. So in the case of Maui, I was actually sitting with the regional administrator during a preparedness ceremony for General Gibbs because he was at a capstone event, and the fires happened. We got a declaration. We started moving out. I started getting mission assignments the next day directly from his team. And so our team, the enterprise, started moving out to try to understand and scope and understand the problem. So if we're looking at things in terms of DSCA phase 0 through 5, right, the preparation up through going to the joint area and up to operations and then anything recovery after that, you can kind of associate those two things as FEMA gives us a mission assignment. Let's go next, Joe. And so for the National Response Framework, that's how we kind of bucket what we do. So the National Response Framework is designed, it's with FEMA. FEMA is under Department of DHS, Department of Homeland Security. That the head of FEMA is actually a presidential appointee. They're a little bit autonomous on how they operate, but under that framework, we're considered, USACE is considered ESF3, or emergency support function 3. In tactical terms, and probably what you're dealing with now, I consider myself the task force engineer for the regional administrator. So when we go out, or whoever that senior FEMA person is on ground, I take myself, as we've been taught, and sit right next to that person, whether they like it or not, and advise them on engineer things. And for us, it's public works and emergency missions, specifically with temporary emergency power. That's generally the first thing that goes out. So when a natural disaster happens, emergency power goes out to get critical infrastructure, shelters, hospitals, anything that the state and FEMA deem necessary. And we have a rapid initiative for that. So Max, who will brief, was one of the first people out the door. I think he actually slept in his car the first night before there was a hotel available to make sure we get power to those survivors. The second thing we did, or the other things that we do, is debris management. I'll talk about that later. Critical public facilities, I'll talk about that. Also, temporary housing, providing housing for those that are displaced. Infrastructure assessments, which is larger government type buildings, to make sure that it can be occupied. Temporary roofing, we also call that blue roofing. In Guam is a little different because it was tin roofs. And then you see the urban search and rescue, which we have some association there with ESF9, which will go on the next slide. But under that national support framework, we launch pretty rapidly in order to help as soon as we can. So again, in tactical terms, it's how do I position myself with that commander, the commander being the Region 9 administrator who's controlling the fight, in order to advise him on engineer matters, specifically within emergency support function 3. Let's go next slide. So as stated before, we do have an association with emergency support function I, which is search and rescue. And I know the Corps has its own search and rescue battalion. The other thing we do closely is emergency support function 12, which is Department of Energy, where we're doing these assessments on grids, doing these assessments on some of these public work facilities. What we also do is work very closely with the Department of Public Works of the state or the county. Specifically in Maui, it's the county right now. Because they are the extension execution agent for the state, because they're the affected area. Next slide. So how does this all flow? The way the Corps breaks this out, there's 43 districts within the Corps, and 9 of those are 05 commands, the rest are 06. So it comes to reason, if you stay in their engineer regiment long enough, you may be in a Corps district. But there's certain districts that are tasked that they maintain readiness, and there's a 2-star at the headquarters right now. It's General Graham that actually goes over these stats weekly and these are readiness stats. These PRTs are ready at any moment's notice, because you never know when a natural disaster is going to happen. So as you see on the slide, if you go left to right, these and the red represents what's currently being activated right now in Maui. Is these teams launch out and apart. So another thing we do within the district is we have to understand how to integrate enablers. These are not organic to the district. I have a separate mission. For example, putting in $700 million by the end of September, right, for acquisition. And so the enterprise just surges and gives me capability as the affected commander. I have to understand how to take those in. I think in your position, where you go into
Those are my papers.
if I have a question out there. Yep. And thanks, sir. I'll stop for questions too. I see it in the chat. If anyone has questions, please stop me and I can explain something. But as I receive those, for example, let's take temporary emergency power is a little unique, because Honolulu district has its own power team, and we.
Hey, Ryan, you went on mute, my friend. Hey, Ryan. Yeah, you're on mute, my friend.
Oh, okay. I think someone muted me. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yep, thanks, sir. So within the district, we have to understand how to integrate those enablers. Let's say if you go to a CTC rotation as a battalion, or it used to be when I was an XO, the brigade commander would give us all the enablers, right? Because we were good at integrating those enablers. So we have to understand how to integrate all that. And as a commander, what I do is I have to understand their capabilities in order to implore them in the right area and be able to guide them. So the Corps launches those from different districts. For example, critical public facilities is coming from Galveston District. Debris management right now is coming from Southwest Division, or specifically the Fort Worth District. Temp power is a little special. It's internal to us. If we had a temp housing, that would come from another location, maybe in the Kansas City District. So that flows into the MSC down to us, and we implore them into the disaster area. Any questions on that slide from the audience? Okay, next slide. Yeah, so I'm going to give it over to Max for the next couple of slides to talk about temp power. Go ahead, Max.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. Chief Warrant Officer 2 Zyman. I'm a construction engineer and technician with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Honolulu District, and I'm Power Mission Commander on the Temporary Emergency Power Planning and Response Team, also called the PRT. Deployed to Maui in response to wildfires that started on August 8th, and our team was already on the ground 3 days later, on day 3, actually. So what I would like to talk about is just how Army officers and NCO could integrate on Power PRT. The question I ask, why military leadership, or what Army leaders can bring to the table? So green suiters, what civilians call us in the USACE, bring unique capabilities to the civilian organization. Military officers and NCOs provide much needed leadership that adds value to the team. We bridge the gap between the highly technical expertise of the civilian engineers and successful execution of the mission. About a year and a half ago, there were no military officers on the power planning and response teams. It was purely comprised of the USACE civilian employees. After looking back on how missions went during the numerous AARs, the decision was made to create 2 additional positions on the team, which were Power Mission Commander and Military Liaison Officer. Both positions provided to be effective in practice and enable Power PRT to deliver the results with a greater success rate. For instance, output increase of how fast the PRT was able to deploy and become fully operational. That's one of the benefits. Officers provided many needed buffer between the PRT and the supported district in charge of the overall disaster response. So what that did, that allowed the PRT to focus on the execution, and their primary mission focus is on installing FEMA emergency generators at public critical facilities. Next slide, please. Thank you. So on this slide, I would like to talk about the roles and responsibilities of military officers on the team, and a little bit of the mission. Overall responsible for ensuring the mission success by providing guidance and coordinating resources and support. Commander is a team leader of the PRT who provides leadership link between all the government deployed power assets and supported commander. Power Mission Commander supervises the PRT and reports status of operations up the chain of command. Is not responsible though, and shall not give any direction to the contractor. So in the PRT, we have the USACE team that manages the operation, and the contractor, the ACI contractor, Advanced Contract Initiative contractor, that does all the work. Mission manager, that's the civilian position. They only one that can direct the contractor or the contracting officer, because mission commander also is the COR for the contract. The commanders being the commander and the mission manager being is like similar to S3 and maybe XO, command sergeant major, all in one. The commander's job is to see the bigger picture. 10 power PRT is relatively small, but important mission, especially during this disaster, because we deployed as a type 4, which is the smallest element out of all 4 types that are available. Having the military present leads the team to better understand the higher mission and the other mission of USACE and other agencies. The commander's ability to lead by keeping their head above the clouds allows mission manager to focus on day-to-day operations while the commander looks at the future. Without the commander position and someone focused on the big picture, the mission manager could easily think that the 10 power PRT is the universe of the emergency response effort. And like it was previously said, we also have the big part played by the debris mission and critical infrastructure. This position is new and helps distinguish between the mission manager COR and the commander positions. The contract says that power mission commander cannot direct the contractor, but power mission commander overall responsible for the success of the mission, which involves providing the mission manager with the guidance that the commander gives his intent, similar to in the regular line unit when the commander gives the intent to the S3, who then issues the task subordinates unit. In our case, this is going to be the contractor and the PRT team staff. In addition to regular responsibilities on the team, power mission commander is a link between the power PRT and other defense energy, agencies involved with the DSCA recovery response. And that's something new. That's something that had never had happened before, where the PRT was coordinating with the other defense agencies. It became essential in requesting support from the Defense Coordinating Officer, the DCO, via mission assignment from FEMA to fulfill the constraints that our team, our contractor, had to carry out the mission. For instance, in Guam, we coordinated Air Force Red Horse trucks to transport the generators to the critical facilities, while the contractor was waiting on their material handling equipment to be shipped from the mainland. In Maui here, we requested and employed 25th ID fuelers to augment the contractor's fueling operations, as our contractor was working on sourcing their fueling assets. It would be delayed by several days, if not more. So the other position, the second military position on the team is mission liaison officer, military liaison officer. He is a liaison, he or she is a liaison the supported district, task force, temporary emergency power, and mission manager. So that officer would brief the command on power mission, military officer who works with for the power mission commander. This position is clearly a broadening opportunity for young officers who may have the TOC experience during the FTX or training center exercises or readiness training, but no emergency response experience. This is something that can be only experienced while in the USACE or 249 Engineer Battalion Prime Power. The military liaison officer operates like S3. So that person will communicate to higher, should learn all other positions on the team and be able to flex to cover other positions when needed. The MLO should also assist the commander and the mission manager to anticipate potential issues and coordinate the staff functions. With the mission specialist, it's similar to S1 and the regular unit. Logistics specialist, S4, enterprise emergency team, which is IT, which would be S6 in the line unit, and USACE common operating picture, also known as a UCOP, which would be S2. This would probably alleviate the mission manager duties. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what are the unique challenges and capabilities that we had on this mission? So temporary power mission response to wildfires is different from the conventional response to natural disasters that we used to for the recovery efforts like hurricanes or typhoons or blizzards during the winter time. Some examples of challenges on our mission include one is cultural, mostly applied to Oconus locations, but sometimes on Oconus too, such as Hawaii, like Oconus would be Hawaii, CNMI, the Commonwealth Northern Mariana Islands, Guam, American Samoa. It's like deployments to the war zone, like Iraq or Afghanistan. Knowing and understanding local culture proved to be very important on our mission and for our mission success. It helps the communication and collaboration not only with the local government, but local population. With this mission, coordinating with the PAO and creating storyboards to emphasize the impact of the mission, this was very important in a mission where locals are getting frustrated with the federal response. Second one is the environmental. In addition to already devastating environmental impact caused by the fires that included burn hazardous materials such as asbestos and various chemicals, the importance of executing power mission without generator fuel or oil spills is paramount. Number three, safety always. Special emphasis on air quality and structural integrity of facility is critical. And we've had our daily meetings to ensure not only our civilian employees, but also the contractors were briefed on the personal safety and wear appropriate PPE when they were working in the ground zero area. There's something else that I wanted to mention that was really unique on our mission and the unique capability that we employed. For the first time, we expanded the GIS UCOP application. We're in addition to standard use of the GIS services, where we tracked and monitored the quality assurance assessments only of the generators. We employed more features such as tracking not only the generators, but also the PRT and contractor personnel and equipment, and build the reporting tools to generate trend of how the mission evolved over all phases of operation. Thank you. That's all I have.
Hey, Chief, thanks.
Sure,
And I think we got some more to go. Just want to remind everybody as you get questions as we go through this, just put them in chat. I'll come back to them. We'll let the briefers kind of continue their flow because I know we're going to get into debris removal. But if you've got questions, either of Colonel Peavy or Chief, just put them in chat and I'll circle back. Okay, Brian, over to you.
Yes, sir. Thanks, right? You know, some of the things Max was talking about for the officers out there. There's three gentlemen on this call that have learned how to be very concise in their communication. It's the OC director, the commandant, and General Watson. I would say in these environments, when a lot of information is flowing out, I encourage everyone to work on that communication. We could always be stewards of that because the commanders at echelon need very concise but precise information to make decisions. And for example, when I'm trying to update General Gibbs, who's on the East Coast, precision and conciseness is really important because he's going in a bunch of meetings to make sure we get what we need. And that's a lifelong thing, but encourage everyone really to work on that. The other one would be stewards of intentional listening. That's something I have to work on continually in my life. My wife would probably tell you I'm not the greatest at it, but it's understanding what people are saying. USACE is 99% civilian. The federal government is mostly civilian. So when you're going into these environments, and if you see yourself there, trust your gut, trust your leadership. You'll have a lot of leadership training, but influence and listening is important. What you experience right now, where you're at, is that's command authority you have within your rank. In USACE, it's really influential. Yes, I have command authority over this organization, but to get work done and do it effectively and completely, I have to learn how to be influential in everything that I do, because all those people you work with are experts, right? They come from generally maybe another districts. And so learning how to be influential is important as well. So going over for the debris removal planning, I know probably have a lot of questions. So one of the missions we got is debris removal. There's two types. In a hurricane, you see several different types of streams of debris, like vegetation, which is trees, down vegetation, white goods, which is refrigerators, cars, different things. And I wouldn't say there's any debris removal that's the same. We've done one in Guam, which is the time now we do this one. The hard thing about the debris removal mission of fire debris removal, it all is all kind of hazardous. It all becomes, we say, personal property debris removal, and it's very emotional. So for the planning, what happened is we sent a planning cell out from the Fort Worth district, and this generally goes in phases, right? So if anyone has seen the news, phase 0 was search and rescue. That was on the county. That was the chief of police and the chief of the fire chief. Phase 1, we have activities in phase 1. There's phase 2. Phase 2 is the bulk of the debris removal, the physical debris. Phase 1 will do some planning. EPA is largely in charge of phase 1, and they're going through the different properties one by one to include the public property and also businesses, and taking the immediate, what they call HHM, household hazardous material. We're finding a lot of Tesla battery stations. They're finding a lot of butane tanks. It's that immediate, it's those immediate hazards they're taking away. Because after they're done, they're going to allow, it's kind of shown on the bottom right chart, which the public can see in the Maui County. So if I'm going bottom right, it's public access. It's people getting in there, understanding, going to that exact location where they lost something. I've been, I've lost a house by a tornado. It was when I was actually at the captain's career course. It was on Goethals Drive. I'm not sure if there's any more houses there, but when I lost my house, I knew exactly where the thing my grandmother gave me that was special to me. And so having people go in the planning phase for public access is important. To note too, throughout this life cycle, even though we're going to be the execution part of it, we are working with our federal, our state, local partners to make sure all this happens. Though the county is in charge of public access, we're going to be a part of that and how we communicate and how we help them do that. So for phase 2, which is the bulk of it, first it starts with the right of entry. That right of entry is critical. It's generally the LIMFAC or the limiting factor. We generally get 50% of a lot of the rights of entry up front, and then another maybe 6 months to a year for the rest of the 50% or who they can't find, or they go to the next of kin. But we will not go in. I think there's the important thing about the right of entry is it allows the property owner to say, we come in, we don't go in. There's a lot of things in social media in Hawaii right now, like we're just going to go in and bulldoze, and that's not the intention. For the ash and fire debris removal, this is a very technical mission. I think I've met more experts in the Corps than I've ever have. I met a treeologist the other day of fire damaged debris trees. So we go in and we go parcel by parcel and understand, okay, hey, we can take this slab out, we can recycle it, or hey, this is just fire and ash debris. We have to wrap it in a geotextile plastic, heat seal it, and send it to a temporary staging site before it goes to final disposition. That portion is going to take 6 to 9, maybe even a year. And what we do for this is we bring on contractors to do that, and we have a hybrid contracting strategy where we leverage industry, a core acquisition, and then we're looking at leveraging local 8A NHOs or Native Hawaiian organizations that are based in Hawaii. And there is a political nature of that, of making sure that we try to maintain economy flowing into Maui, because that's important, because one of the main things for Hawaii is their economy. And Lahaina was a huge part of Maui's economy. Another thing to mention when we talk about debris removal and planning is how are we going to approach the mission? One was the acquisition strategy, but I've given people 3 things. One is we have to be culturally sensitive. It's right. It's your question, and we'll get to the General Watson. Everything we do in Hawaii has a cultural component to it. The land beneath me that I'm sitting on is sacred to the people of Hawaii. Think of a Native American reservation, but that is completely across Hawaii, and there's a lot of history to that. Lahaina specifically was the was the place of seated power after King Kamehameha in 1810 unified the island. So there is a very emotional connection. I have employees who have family members that lost homes. We had a grieving moment in the district because think of the most emotional movie you've watched, and think about that most emotional moment. And as a male in uniform, I generally like saying I cry, but there's movies I cry to. Think of that one moment. That is what the land and Aina and the history of Hawaii mean to the people of Hawaii, and they live that daily. So respecting culture is absolutely paramount. And I've told the district and anyone that's going to be a part of this mission, that is our top priority. Number two is being methodical. This is a very engineer specific, kind of scientific mission where we have to approach it that way. But like even within a military operation, you have to plan it correctly, because if you don't, then you're assuming too much risk in the actual physical operation of the mission. That is the same thing here: is plan it correctly, plan it methodically. We may not go as fast as people want, but when we're taking the bulk of the execution and the time, we're doing it correctly. And the last would be being expeditious. And when I say expeditious, not fast, I don't mean fast. What I mean is, where can we gain efficiencies in the process, because that allows people to heal and recover faster. As much as I could say, if you look at top right, where there's that parcel is on the very far right of the top right graphic where there's nothing there, that's our goal. Our goal is to get property back to where it can be rebuilt. Maybe the community decides it's all memorial. I don't know, or maybe the individual people want to move away, or maybe they want to rebuild. But that's our goal in debris removal. We have to plan that correctly. Some of the things you see there is General Gibbs and the EPA mission manager. To know we have to work very closely with the EPA and our federal partners when it comes to getting this mission done right. We have things like chemists, PhD chemists, that are testing the soil to understand how we can get back in and get people back into those parcels. But from a day-to-day perspective, what the Corps has done is they've established an RNO. The Corps doctrine is in a mission like this, they established called a recovery field office forward. So essentially it's the district forward. Colonel Curry, the Rock Island sitting district commander, has come forward to establish a mini district. It's funny, sir, because I was his battalion XO. We kind of joke that now we kind of work for each other simultaneously now. But he is forward establishing as one of the senior experienced commanders in USACE, conducting that tactical day-to-day mission. And then I will step back on the state strategic level to help shape resource and plan down the road to help him execute. And that RFO will go away. So think of it as a robust TAC from a TOC, or maybe even the consolidation area of someone executing that mission, and that will be drawn back into the main or the consolidation area once that mission is complete. He assumes all ESF3 missions. The biggest one is debris, but he will consume the responsibility for all the ESF3 missions that USACE has, directly tasked or mission assigned from FEMA. Next slide, please. Okay, so critical public facilities. This is another big one. Keiki is the word for kid. So there was unfortunately there was a school that burned, right? Kids cannot go to school. They're all going. It's about 675 students right now that didn't realize they're going to go virtual for maybe the first half of the school year. So with critical public facilities, we've been working with the Department of Education, HDOE, to understand conditions. You see them walking there on the site, going over some plans. There's things like EIS's environmental impact studies. Hey, do we have the right hookups? I need to run a sewer line? What's the geohydrology in the area in order to put a temporary school? And that's what we're looking at doing right now. The Galveston district is in charge of the acquisition. The RFO is in charge of the execution. So I just described what an RFO was. And we're in the process of putting that contract in place. And more than likely, it will bring in temporary structures to allow kids to go to school and get back to a normal state and predictability state. And that's really the goal for these kids. So this is a very special mission to us too, because we're being able to affect families. Everything we do in these situations are really, really emotional. And you may find in your experience, if you do DSCA from phase 0 to 5, or even in an operation, right, as you rebuild, you'll find some of the same symbiosis of what we're doing in the USACE of what you may have to do maybe on a deployment. Next slide. So that brings us to questions, and happy to field anything.
Okay, yeah, we got a couple. So first of all, from the Commandant, wanted to know, really, I thought you laid out the cultural part of this very, very well. Something that I think we've learned a lot about. But are there some specifics? I know, Ryan, you talked about a little bit about Chief, in terms of what were some of the cultural considerations that you really had to make in restoring a emotional commodity like power in the wake of a crisis? Chief, any thoughts on that?
Yes, sir. So it was great to have the POH PRT to deploy, the power planning and response team to deploy to Maui, because we had people who are very familiar with the area, really familiar with the land, and of course they have their relatives and close ones who live either on Big Island or Maui or Oahu. So they know the culture already. They're really familiar, and those were our ambassadors, who actually went out there, and we're not normally by the contract. The contract is like it starts with the 249. The guys doing the assessments going out and being the first phase that the POCs were interacting with, but then the contractor. But we were actually sending out our QAs and to be those ambassadors and talking to the people, talking to the communities. Even buying some small things, it's like underwear, like socks, bringing food, even like National Guards soldiers who got activated after the event. They were all placed on the along the roads and the block posts. So they just bring in simple stuff like donuts or coffee or some food to them. It just building those. It all comes down to building the relationships, and it was easier for us a little bit because we were familiar with the culture, and it helped us a lot. But it just knowing the culture, understanding it, and try to build the relationship. That was the key for us, sir.
Yeah, so Chief, well said. And it's certainly something we've learned both in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I'm hoping that, it's times like this that reminds us the importance of culture. It certainly will be incredibly important in any LISCO. Most of our games are going to be away games, and when we have away games, there's culture there. So we need to be sensitive to it. So, hey, look, there was one other question I wanted to get to. It came from Lieutenant Colonel Page, and Ryan, maybe you can answer it. So, first of all, the framework that you laid out for debris removal, very eye-opening. 3 priorities. Number 1, cultural. We talked about the importance of that. 2, that this is an engineering problem, and there has to be a methodology, and we have to apply some science. And some art, and then how do I then make this expeditious? So in the engineering and mythology, Colonel Page asked, what kind of real estate did you have to have here to do the sorting? I mean, you kind of described being able to, pack up once a decision is made that hazardous material, people, it gets to a certain place where then you're actually packing it up and to sort it out later. What kind of lay down yard is that?
Yes, sir. Great question. First, we have to be students of terrain. Specifically, when a fire happens in an archipelago in our island chain, it goes pretty fast. The spread is different. It goes to the ocean and spreads left to right. And that's what you see the pattern in Lahaina right now. We have to understand egress and ingress and egress routes because the lines of communication are limited. And so working with Department of Transportation, but specifically for a laydown, that is going to be the trick. And we're working on that right now, because if we have several contractors on site at the same time, if we have families going through and sifting for personal effects, we're working through that, and that is a major consideration that we have to include some of the engineering and science that goes with it. So if one person doesn't, we're assuming that parcels aren't going to be adjacent. We're assuming that it may skip because one resident doesn't want to sign a specific for the yes be adjacent to the current where we put the normal trash. Where they have their landfill, it only has about a year left of capacity. So we have to think through, and we have to help the county. And that's where we bring in that engineer expertise to say, okay, we think that you have to build it out like this. You have to build it where it can handle enough, but still be temporary, because that debris is not meant to just stay there. It's meant for final disposition, whether they keep it in a special place because it's considered sacred soil, or they ship it off island somewhere.
Yeah, and Steve Kalucha, Ryan had another question on insurance companies and the interface that you're having with insurance companies. Clearly that doesn't necessarily come to you, but FEMA has to have a major relationship with them. And so how does that impinge upon the Corps and the Corps' role in things like debris sift, debris removal?
Yes, sir. Great question, sir. And you're spot on. It's really a FEMA function of how maybe they do buyouts. Maybe the insurance company works with FEMA and with the resident. For us, it really affects the efficiency of what we work, because there are so many factors. As we do our normal military MDMP and we do our branches and sequels, there are so many branches and sequels to this that maybe we call it is a known unknown at the point. We know it's out there, but it hasn't been realized yet. And until we realize it, then we have to factor it in. So specifically, sorry, it would be probably the speed or efficiency at what we would want to go. And then working with FEMA to see how the insurance companies are going to act in the wake of that. We're still waiting on, that's still supposed to be realized, because there's 3 areas. There's Kula, Olinda, for anyone that knows Maui, it's kind of the upper area, and Lahaina's on the southwest. Right now, that mainly affects Lahaina. Kula and Olinda, it's about 40 structures. It's smaller. It hasn't really, the insurance question hasn't really affected them that much.
Yeah. So Ryan, we've got another question for you, but I've got one for Chief. So Chief, as you were describing the PRT, which, although it is a cross-functional team in business terms, or a company team and combined arms, I mean, it is in fact many disciplines, but it is also a functional, if you're in the FEMA world, now it is a functional provider focused on power. But all of your stakeholders are part of cross-functional teams, each with their own agenda. And it just seems to me that this has to be, everybody's coming to you, everybody's trying to set your priorities. This is not unlike what any engineer faces on any battlefield, where we just get lots of competing priorities. How is it, Chief, that you were able to, keep not only yourself, but your team attuned to the big picture and to making sure that your priorities were in fact true, and then being able to convey those to all these other stakeholders?
Yes, sir. So the way the response for the power PRT is structured, so all the requirements are coming in from the bottom all the way up. So meaning from the bottom is from the county, and they request the assistance from the state if they're not capable, if they don't have enough resources. Then state push it up to FEMA if state does not have the capacity, and then at the FEMA level, at the above state FEMA level, that's when all the request and mission assignments coming into us. So sometimes it bypasses that chain and it comes directly to us because they see Corps of Engineers sign, or they see our contractors that also have their Corps of Engineers signs on their vehicles, and they trying to approach and find out how they can get their the generator. So that, but we have the very strict process for that, and we created the source to speak like cheat for them, where we pass out and just direct them to the local officials how they can submit their request. And when on the higher level, and we're trying to keep it that way. It's been multiple times that we were receiving a lot of requests which would exceed the capacity of our the size of our team to execute. Let's say at the current capacity we can produce 5 installations per day, but we're getting 15. We would have and rely heavily on state and FEMA to prioritize that to us, and we're trying to bring it back to them. So we're trying to control that, control to so that they do not put the responsibility on us, but they will be handled on their level. And we have a couple positions from our team at the Joint Field Office who would work directly with the ESF 3 team leaders and FEMA and other ESFs to make that coordination and determination.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I'll jump in here. It's spheres of influence, sir. It's also planting LNOs. I mean, it's the good old fashioned LNOs. We have LNOs in the state EOC to include county that feed information. And this is where I would come in of fighting friction. There's a very large education component to this. As a federal agency, USACE writ large does this annually, unfortunately, with all the natural disasters. Rarely will you find a county, unless you're California and deal with fire every year, that just knows how to do it. So what Chief did is he implanted himself with leaders in the county. I went to the state, and that's how we kind of split effort. And he started saying, hey, you may want to look at this, and started teaching them how. And that's how we help control some of that white noise, is by forefront education.
Yeah, fantastic. And, you know, this is why engineers do this really well, really, really well. So I do want to get to, there was a question, Ryan, for you on, like any operation and in any DSCA in particular, you come to the fight with a myriad of authorities. Some of those authorities, I mean, they all have their own caveats, but you've got to, as a menu, able to, you know, bring the right authority to bear at the right place, right time, given this menu you have. And so specifically, the question was, you know, what were the challenges that you had in distinguishing the team's response, not only under ESF 3, but also supporting the DCO of the 25th? Because like you said, you can get a lot of different box tops here. Pretty soon you're not sure what puzzle you're solving, right? And then how does that transcend down to the county level, DOD, and so on?
Yes, sir. First, I would say it's POD plugging into USARPAC. In this situation, USARPAC is designated by INDOPACOM as the TJ flick. So General Flynn takes over any Title 22, 12, or 10. They did have a dual status commander. It so happened that the AXING, Colonel Fielder, was the Title 10 deputy. We made it a very strong point for me to be very integrated with him. Though we were mission assigned directly from FEMA, we wanted to show that we were part of the Army team. So that's how we handled that. For distinguishable work, what we did, sir, is we brought experts in first to plug into what we considered the center of gravity. At that point, it was the governor, and it was the TAG, General Hara, and it was also the HIEMA, or the Hawaii Emergency Management Administrator, where they were deciding those streams of work and those streams of mission. That transition, the center of gravity transition, essentially 2 weeks later to the county, where they started taking over a lot of the execution portion. So it's a lot of planning up front at the state level to understand what do we need. And again, sir, I would say it's education. A lot of what I did is I walked around talking about, not that I don't seek mission, it's inappropriate, but just trying to educate people on what our capability is. And then, sir, from what you've taught us, and honestly for what all the senior leaders in this call have taught us, I just implanted with Mr. Fenton and started talking about capability so I could help shape definitive lines of work, but also shape, hey, sir, we should do this instead of that, and just being there to provide him, especially even when he did his brief. So I could say I think I probably briefed more secretary level, the chair, congressionals than I think I would have ever had. So I'm getting a master class as a lieutenant colonel how to communicate in that way, which is great. But just really honing our sense that we're taught as an engineer officer, getting in there and being at the precise moment on the battlefield we should be as a commander. And to me, those two responses, those made all the difference in being able to fight this friction and provide information back, because people just want to know. Good leaders just want to know information. Some of that doesn't drive decision, but that's also teaching the team we're never going to get frustrated with any type of information requirement, because that's helping leaders at echelon create the common operating picture to provide resources to the fight.
Yeah, really, really good. So look, you can't even be a sapper, can't be a member of this regiment and not be in awe, Ryan, of you and Chief and the work that you guys have done, and tons of others out of the Corps of Engineers. But you also can't be listening to this conversation and not be thinking about this is going to happen again. I may have a role in it. And this is not just necessarily the purview of defense support to civil assistance, civil authorities. This is something that if we get involved in a major large-scale contingency operation, combat operation, urban warfare, we're going to have to do this again. And so, I took a ton of notes of things that, people ought to be considering in a LSCO environment that you just experienced. So my hat's off to you, number one, for the job you've done, but also giving us a glimpse of things that we need to kind of sharpen our sword on. So I really do appreciate it, Ryan. Thanks very much. And my commandant, I'll give you the last word, sir.
Hey, sir, thanks. Hey, Ryan, Chief, great job. Out there, the pointy end of the spear of the response here. You make us all proud to be engineers and to have you on our team. Hey, sir, another home run by AEA, bringing this home to keep the dialogue going in the regiment. Super thankful for everything that you do. We'll get the next topic out to the regiment here within the next few weeks, and look forward to seeing folks again at the next installment of this. But tremendously well done. Thanks, Ron.
Okay, that wraps us up for this engineer rally point. Ryan, Chief, thanks very much again. I really would look forward to a couple of articles if you think about what you might put in this lens on for what we ought to be thinking about in LSCO. Be great topics for Engineer Magazine, which, by the way, goes out to every battalion, every district, free. Okay, across all compos. All right. Hey, thanks again, Chief. Good seeing you. Ryan, always thanks again for stepping in the breach out here. Lead to serve.